You all know all of this better than me. I'm just, believe it or not, I'm trying to encourage you, especially with these documents, to think about your life as a journey in the footsteps of the nonviolent Jesus. Isn't that lovely? And to reread the gospel from the Gandhian's perspective of nonviolence, and to rethink your own life and your ministry and the congregation from the perspective of gospel nonviolence in light of this terrible moment we're in the world. And to be teachers of all these great things. Isn't that great? I don't know if this is helping you, but I'm back drinking coffee, so it's going to be a setback for you. You didn't laugh at that, so I'm thinking maybe you're agreeing. Anyway, so all of these nice things. Maybe I could look a little bit more at the Sermon on the Mount, and then I want to give you some concluding points, and then just invite you to talk among yourselves about any of this. Is that so okay? So he's gone, the Sermon on the Mount is these Beatitudes, and then he's basically saying, I'm the fulfillment of the law and the prophets, and that's where he's talking about the entire, what we call the Hebrew Bible today, which is written over 1,000 years by hundreds of authors, and it's a very slow revelation of God. This is the question, where is God in human history? And the churches have always said one thing. I mean, you could say, okay, God is definitely in nature. God is definitely in human beings. God is in the scriptures. But we all agree God is in the person of Jesus Nazareth. That's the clearest expression of the nature of God, would be in this guy. Well, when it all started out, you got Abraham saying God is one, and everybody's freaking out. That's a huge breakthrough in human history. But then, like the book of Chronicles could have been written by Trump. It's horrible. Let's kill him. And then you get to the Psalms, and it's like, push the heads of the babies of the children of my enemies against the wall, God. And then but then there's a slow breakthrough in the wisdom literature, which is very mysterious. And wisdom says, show mercy. Okay, that's new in the history. And then you get to the prophets. Wow, and Ezekiel and some of these guys, Jeremiah, and they're doing stuff. But by the end, before the time of Jesus, basically they're all Sandinistas, which is work for justice for the poor and kill the enemy, the oppressors. You see what I mean? Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount, the text which I'm not going to read is, I am the fulfillment of the law and the prophets. I'm all of that, but it's radical active nonviolence now. And then it's been kind of, my opinion, downhill since then. He really is the fulfillment, and we can't barely cope. What happens next? In the Sermon on the Mount, this is how I always remember it. They're called antitheses. There's 6 of them. You have heard it said, but I say to you. And he goes through 6 of them. I want to look at the 1st, the 5th, and the 6th. Because this is what Gandhi read all the time. And they're just amazing. I can't help but read the first one. This is Matthew chapter 5, verse 21. You have heard it said to your ancestors, thou shalt not kill, and whoever kills will be liable to judgment. But I say to you, don't even get angry. What? What? That's not possible. Jesus. Now, come on. Yeah, that's what it says here. But I say to you, whoever is angry with his brother will be liable to judgment. And whoever says to his brother, Raka, will be answerable to the Sanhedrin. And whoever says, you're a fool, will face the fiery Gehenna. Therefore, if you bring your gift to the altar, and you recall that your brother has anything against you, leave your gift there at the altar, go first and be reconciled with your brother, then come and offer your gift. Settle with your opponent quickly while on the way to court. Otherwise, your opponent will hand you over to the judge, and the judge will hand you over to the guard, and you'll be thrown into prison. Amen, I say to you, you will not be released until you have paid the last penny. Are there any questions? I read that fast deliberately because you're going, what? 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 And Gandhi read that every day. You've heard it said, thou shalt not kill. I say to you, do not even get angry. So, when you remember someone has something against you, and you're going to the altar to worship God, whatever you do, don't go near God. Don't worship God. This is the first teaching on prayer is don't pray. Leave your gift at the altar, whatever you do. And in the Greek, the commandment is katagalite. Be reconciled with the person you've hurt. Gandhi read this every day. I don't know if you're reading this every day, but I invite you to, and this is the first of 6 of them. Isn't that shocking? Shocking. If you dare look at it. Now, Veronica and my friend Thich Nhat Hanh, they get it. This is Buddhism. This is not brain surgery. But to us, I mean, you should come to the United States somewhere and watch me say this to a crowd. I was invited to Oaxaca, Mexico, to give a retreat to the Maryknoll missionaries. Don't tell them I said this. I get to this part, and one of the Maryknollers stands up and starts yelling, "How dare you tell us not to be angry? I'm not angry. Look at me, I'm not angry, but I hate my mother so much. And in fact, I think this is so ridiculous." And she stormed out of the room, and the group got up and walked out of the room, and that was the end of my retreat. And I just read the text. Gandhi said, what if Jesus is at least as smart as us? I'm just saying, but I don't know. Maybe as smart as us. He's looking at the roots of violence. What is anger? But you've been hurt. And your anger is stirring up the violence in you. He's talking about the roots of killing is within each one of us. And we don't want to feed it. Oh, we'd say, well, it's a neutral emotion and we just don't want to act on it. Okay, but you're not going to act out the anger. In fact, you're working towards your inner disarmament. Gandhi, a week before he was assassinated, the reporter said, what is the greatest thing you did in your life? He said, I cannot believe he said it. I decided to take Jesus seriously in the Sermon on the Mount and not cultivate my anger. If you're Gandhi, you're a raging lunatic because all your people are being killed by the British. He's saying, I'm not going to be a raging lunatic because Jesus says that's not going to work. And in fact, I'm going to work to stop the British, but I'm going to use something else. But then if you follow the teachings of Jesus, and I'm sorry, I'm talking so fast, but it's so exciting. Jesus says, oh yeah, you're angry because somebody did something to you? The minute you think you're angry, remember all the terrible things you did to others. And whatever you do, don't go to God. It's shocking. Katagalite. You go back and apologize and reconcile to the person you hurt. It's incredible teachings of nonviolence. Then, once you have reconciled, go back to the sanctuary and give your gift to God. This is just the first of the 6 antitheses. So I'm with Archbishop Tutu. Forgive me for name dropping. And he says to me, you know, you got to work for peace and justice to the day you die. Remember I told you that this morning? Well, what I didn't tell you was he knows, you see how I am. Well, you should see how he is. But anyway, we're both a little over the top. And I said to him, oh, man, I was such a smart aleck, but he could handle it because he's a smart aleck. And I said, oh, Tutu, give me a break. Can you imagine I said that? This is a great man. I hit him, and I went, how do you do it? How do you work for peace and justice till the day you die? What a thing to say to me. Oh, gosh, and this is when these great people kill me. He comes right up to my face, and he goes, I cry. And he burst into tears. I've just walked in the room. He starts sobbing on my shoulder. John, I cry every single day for humanity. Look at what we're doing. If you only knew what they did to my people here. And imagine how God is crying. I cried every single day of my life, he says. And then he says, and John, I laugh. I laugh every single day of my life. And just looking at you makes me laugh because you're ridiculous. This then started this long thing. He burst in, he goes, you're absurd. I thought you were some holy thing, but you're... I said, I will have you know I'm 50 years old. Oh, that's ridiculous. Anyway, he's laughing hysterically. And I remembered, he's a person of the Sermon on the Mount. Because he reads the Sermon on the Mount, and he lives the Sermon on the Mount, and even though he's had issues with nonviolence, he practices the emotional life of nonviolence. And if you read the Sermon on the Mount, regularly. Jesus says, whatever you do, avoid these two emotions. And whatever you do, cultivate these other two emotions. And we do them all the opposite. Right there, I just read it to you. Avoid anger. It won't sustain you. The longer I'm involved in the struggle, the angrier I can be because you know how bad things are and it's going to get worse. But I don't want to be a raving lunatic, and I look at Tutu, and he's a lot of fun to be with. And by the way, he's changing the world. So is Thich Nhat Hanh and so many other great people. Mother Teresa was ridiculously funny. And Joan Baez says Martin Luther King was the funniest person she ever met. But you don't think about that way about Dr. King. He's not a raging lunatic, and he knows he's going to be killed. I think Gandhi was like that too. The other thing Jesus said is avoid fear. If the one thing said more than anything else, do not be afraid. Do not be afraid. Do not be afraid. Do not be afraid. So what do? I already read it to you. You already know. The second beatitude, blessed are those who mourn, grieve, cry. That is the healthy, nonviolent, emotional life. And rejoice and be glad. That's the healthy, nonviolent life. It's not happiness, joy. And Tutu's known around the world for his joy and for crying. Does that make sense? Okay, I find that helpful. And the katagalite thing. Who are the people you've hurt? Go and be reconciled. This is what God wants. Then you're getting at the roots undercutting the culture of killing and war. Well, that's just the first. We're going to be here till midnight at this rate. I'm so sorry. The fifth antithesis. So this is Matthew 5, verse 38. Leo Tolstoy read this around 1885, the great writer, you know who I'm talking about, Leo Tolstoy, and decided to change his entire life. And the last 25 years of his life, all he wrote about was Matthew 5, 38 and 39. Did you know that? He was trying to change the whole Russian church into a church of nonviolence, and he totally failed. And a year before he died, he gets a letter for some guy named Mohandas in South Africa, and he turned to his secretary and said, this guy is the most important person on the planet. And Mohandas Gandhi was completely unknown. Tolstoy could see this is the one person who's going to go farther than I did. Here's the verse. You have heard it said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, offer no violent resistance to one who does evil. Now, I say that because I've tried to study this in the Greek, and the translations are all bad. But the best translation, offer no violence, no violent resistance, antistene, to one who does violence to you. That's a commandment. That's nonviolence right there. You're forbidden. I mean, if you want to follow this guy, I'm just saying, maybe you don't want to follow this guy. If you want to follow this guy, if you claim you're following this guy, the days of violent retaliation are over. Gandhi said an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth just make the whole world blind and toothless. Doesn't work, okay? So we'll all kill each other, and wasn't that great? No, it's just stupid. We're going to break the downward cycle of violence. We're going to non-cooperate with violence. The violence stops here in my body. Now, set the scene. Jesus is there by the Sea of Galilee. He's got all these poor people. The life is so horrible. The Roman army is coming through. I mean, really, Palestine 2,000 years ago was one of the bleakest, most horrible places on the planet. And what did they do? They stole the little food there was for the 2,000 soldiers coming through. They burned down the huts. They raped the women, killed the children, and forced the men to carry the stuff on to the next battle, and they were just killing everybody as they could go. And Jesus is saying, arise, walk forth, work for justice, be a peacemaker, offer no violent resistance to one who does evil. Can you imagine what Peter and the gang are doing? No, Jesus does a workshop on the methodology of nonviolence. Do you all know this? Have you all studied this? He gives 5 examples. Number 1, I'm going to read it to you. This is verse 39. Again, but I say to you, offer no violent resistance to one who does evil. When someone strikes you on your right cheek, turn the other one as well. If anyone goes to law with you over your tunic, hand him your cloak as well. Number 3, should anyone press you into service for 1 mile, go with him the extra 2 miles. Give to the one who asks, and do not turn your back on one who wants to borrow. This is like a Kingian workshop on nonviolence, and you're looking at me like, oh. Have you all studied this? Have you? No, seriously. You've read it. Is Richard still here? The one who was asking me a question before? He got a better offer. Come on up. I want to slug Richard to demonstrate how this works. Come on up here, Richard. It's a little revenge here for saying I was hard on Christians.
This is revenge.
So Jesus is teaching nonviolence to the oppressed Galileans. He's issued a commandment. Offer no violent resistance to one who does evil. And then he gives 5 examples about how to do that. I didn't make this up. I just read it to you. I'm going to demonstrate the first example with Richard. Sorry.
I know it's coming.
Okay, so what's wrong with this scenario? I'm just doing what the first example is. I read it to you. Now look carefully. You heard me read it. You know what I said? Someone once said, you didn't really slug it. Nope. What did the actual text say? When someone strikes you where? When someone strikes you on the right cheek, where does my fist land? On the left cheek. It's not possible to strike Richard on the right cheek. Did everybody hear me say that? It's not possible for me to strike Richard on the right cheek. Nobody's left-handed. Actually, in those days, the left hand is only used for unclean things, for the bathroom. You wouldn't even use it to strike. But I didn't make this up. I just read this to you. When someone strikes you on the right cheek, turn it off. It's not possible for me to hit you. So what the heck is Jesus talking about? No, he doesn't say that. What's happening? Richard is kneeling down. I'm the horrible Roman soldier coming in. I use the back of my hand. You horrible peasant. Top-down humiliation and oppression. You're nobody, Richard. And Jesus is teaching oppressed Galileans. Turn the other cheek and claim that you are a human being. You have to deal with me equally. I'm not taking your humiliation, your top-down oppression. Isn't that fantastic? Did you know this? Aren't you Christians? Did you read the sermon? What? Veronica, did you know this? So do you see the power? But it's scary. It means Richard has to engage the oppressor, but not use violence. He's claiming his dignity in front of me and saying, I'm a human being. Try the other cheek. And there's that cognitive dissonance because the guy can't. You can't use the backhand on the other cheek because it doesn't work. This is 2,000 years old. This is like Dr. King doing a workshop on nonviolence and civil rights. Thank you very much, Richard. That wasn't too painful, I hope. What do you think about that? Oh, you didn't like that one? He gives a second one. Do you know this already? You ever never heard this? Gandhi read this sentence every single day, dear friends. I didn't make this up. When someone strikes you on the right cheek, and why? Reflect with me just on the fact that you've never heard this. And you've been serving your whole life. Imagine the insanity of the church now that has never taken this nonviolent stuff seriously. And this isn't even the climax. The second one, I'm going to have to read it to you. I read it to you once. If anyone goes to law with you over your tunic, hand him your cloak as well. This is going to shock you too. We know in those days that there was a court and, what do you call it when the entire class of impoverished people is in debt their entire lives to the landlord, right? And That's life in the oppressed world. Right? You're just stuck permanently in debt. And the landlord is coming to get your coat off your back. Now, in those days, you wore, these are probably men, wore two pieces of clothing, an inner garment and an outer garment. There you're in the courtroom because they think they're liberal oppressors. And the landlord's going to take the coat off your back. I didn't make this up. What did Jesus just say? Huh? Give him your tunic as well. Well, now imagine you're in a packed courtroom. They're fighting for your outer garment, and Jesus says, give him your inner garment. What's left? You're standing naked in courtroom. According to Roman law in ancient Palestine, anyone who sees a naked person must immediately be arrested and put in prison for a year. Everybody would have to arrest themselves, except for you. You'd be the only one free. That's right there in the sermon. This is creative, active nonviolence. And it's scary and risky. And you can imagine Peter and the gang going, I'm not going to do that. You didn't like that one? There's a third. Should anyone press you into service for 1 mile, go with him the extra mile, right? We know there was a law passed that went throughout the Roman world. Because we're nice Roman oppressors. We're like Americans, we're liberal. We only torture you for a little bit. That's literally what they were thinking. So the new progressive Roman law was you could only force the oppressed person once you've stolen their stuff and killed their family and made them go. They can only go 1 mile. Well, do the math. The Romans are coming through. They're making you carry the packs 1 mile. Say, hey, listen, I don't mind. I'll go a 2nd mile with you. The Roman soldiers would all have to be arrested for violating the new liberal law. Are you with me? Does this make sense? I didn't make this up. Is this being lost in translation here probably? For the translators, do you want me to repeat any of that? Do you see what I'm saying, folks? How creative, active, daring, nonviolent resistance is to oppression. And this is Jesus. This is the way our guy is. And Martin Luther King and Gandhi took it infinite new ways, as did so many people around the planet. It's just great, isn't it? I invite you to ponder that. And this leads to the 6th ultimate final antithesis. I'm going to read it from Matthew chapter 5, verse 43. You have heard it said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be sons and daughters of your heavenly God. For God makes his sun rise on the bad and the good, and causes the rain to fall on the just and the unjust. If you love those who love you, what reward will you have? Do not the tax collectors do the same? And if you greet your brothers and sisters only, I love this. What's so unusual about that? Do not the pagans do the same? You be perfect as God is perfect. The better word is compassionate as God is compassionate. So this is the culmination of the Sermon on the Mount. It's the most political sentence in the entire Bible. And it's the only place, I think, where Jesus talks about God and explains God. It's all there. And all the scholars say no one in history had ever said anything like this before. And we have done everything we can for 2,000 years to go against this. Because in those days, the way you wrote was the center of the text is the climax, not the end. So this is the climactic teaching. You have heard it said, love your countrymen. It's a patriarchal society. You love the people of Canada. We Americans in the U.S., we love them, only people in the United States. And to kill the people declared expendable by your nation state. It's nation state language. It's not the guy across the street that you don't like is my enemy. No, that's not this is nation state stuff. Kill them. That's why we got them. You get to kill your enemies. But I say to you, in the Greek, agape, your enemies. Unconditional, nonviolent, non-retaliatory, sacrificial love for the people Your country is trying to kill, as my followers, you side with them. You lay down your lives with them. For people in the United States, that's the people of Afghanistan now, Yemen, Syria, Palestine, and so forth. But everybody. How do you do that, dear friends? As people of active nonviolence, as peacemakers, how can you fulfill this commandment? I used to say to myself, okay, maybe, but Jesus at least give me an answer. And I could never find anyone who explained why do we do this. And I think it was Dr. King who said, I read in one of his sermons, he's the only one who really explained it. And I want to look it up to make sure I get it right. He said, Martin Luther King said, Jesus doesn't say, love your enemies because it's the right thing to do, even though it is. He doesn't say, love your enemies because it's the philosophic good to be done, even though it is. Jesus doesn't say, love your enemies because it's the only practical political solution left for the planet, even though it is. This is the end of the nation-state system. It's the end of the world as we know it. Universal nonviolent love. Why does he say, love your enemies? We already went through this. Blessed are the peacemakers. What's the end of that beatitude? They shall be called the sons and daughters of God. Did we not just agree that you all are the sons and daughters of God? Love your enemies? Then you're really the sons and daughters of the God who lets the sun rise on the good and the bad and the rain to fall on the just and the unjust. God is a God of universal nonviolent love. And you're that God's sons and daughters, so you go and do that. Isn't that incredible? In the most political sentence in the Bible, he gives us a direct description of the nature of God. God lets the sun rise on good and bad people, the rain to fall on just and unjust people. God practices universal nonviolent love, and so you do too. Are there any questions? Isn't that spectacular? This is what Gandhi was way ahead of us on, pondering every single day. What does this mean for your mission? What does this mean for the Sisters of the Holy Cross, or all of you doing good work? Somehow or other, your act of nonviolence has to engage with the people being targeted by Canada or the United States, it seems to me. We have to keep breaking down these walls and showing active nonviolence, and I just love all that. Well, I could go on and on. Maybe I could just give you a few closing points, because I was thinking about this and trying to, how do you sum it up? Look, I got my 400 pages. Number one, this is what I was trying to say today about nonviolence. It means we are going to be people who claim our fundamental identity as the beloved daughters, the beloved sons of the God of peace and universal love. I like that. That's the heart of the whole spirituality of nonviolence. This is who you are. This is why you're peacemakers, why you love people around the world universally, because you're the sons and daughters of the God of peace. I invite you to do that, and in your ministry in the world, to help everyone know who they are and remember who they are. And that will be the motivation for our nonviolence. I mean, it is the good to be done. It is the only practical solution left. But there's even deeper, greater news. This is who we are, existentially. Second, I invite you from now on to be people of eschatological nonviolence. That's a big $10 word. Eschatology, you remember, means the study of the end of the world. Oh, but that's just, it means the study of the end times. No, it's the study of the beginning of eternity. No, that's how we got into this business that the apocalypse is blowing up the Middle East and blowing up the planet, and then they'll have the second coming of Jesus. What's the opposite of that? Eschatological nonviolence. You and I, from this day forward, are living fully in the kingdom of God, in the reign of God. We're way beyond Canada or the United States or Haiti or Peru or wherever you're from. It's like saying, from now on, I invite you to be a global citizen. We're one with all 7.6 billion people and the creatures and Mother Earth and in God, for God, through God. Does that make sense? Or you're going, well, John, that's nice. Good luck with that. I think this is a hope. This is a way forward. And it can get us out of our stuckness to try to imagine every day we're living in the reign of nonviolence, in universal love and peace. This is how, to answer the question maybe for Kathy about a way forward. You can't be schizophrenic if you're throwing all your money, or you're just really crazy like me. You throw all your money living as fully in the reign of God as possible. What would that look like for you? You know, and I like that. I like that. And that means talking about the reign of God. Third, I invite you as apostles of nonviolence to be students and teachers of nonviolence for the rest of your life. We're going to destroy the planet, but you have more power than you realize. Wherever you are, talk about this. You could say, I heard this guy talk about it, and then use that and see what people think. And then be a big name dropper like me. Jesus did this. And watch, I've had people go, why do you bring him up? Can't we just drop the bombs in Iraq? But Jesus wouldn't want it. Yeah, but what does he have to do with that? I'm trying to make you laugh here. I couldn't believe, these were my parishioners who were saying this to me. To be teachers of active nonviolence, to learn and teach the methodology of nonviolence and how movements work and where they are now. So you've got your homework to do. There's more to learn if you don't know this. And if you're not sure where to start, go and read Gandhi. Go and read Martin Luther King. They're very good. Fourth, well, I said this before. I think things are so bad. One of the casualties of this world of war and killing, how should I put this, is the loss of the imagination. That's talking about this blindness. In the United States, you can't say to people, what would it be like if we got rid of our nuclear weapons and all our weapons? People go, well, you're crazy, because they're so blind, stuck in violence. You and I are called to be visionaries of nonviolence. Isn't that great? To reclaim the imagination for a new world of peace with justice. That's what you're doing. That's what you've been doing all your lives, and that's what the community is saying. We're going to do it even better. We're going to help our people reimagine Montreal, Canada, Haiti, Peru as a new world of nonviolence, justice for the poor. This is lovely things. Now, I was saying to somebody earlier, my heroes are the abolitionists. I don't think we talked about it. I can't even remember. They're just nuts. These people are really crazy. And I'm talking about the North American abolitionists in the historic movement of slavery up to the 1800s. There was this guy in Rochester, William Lloyd Garrison, in 1821, who stood up and made this famous speech. And he said, "Excuse me, America, today I am announcing the abolition of slavery." You can't say it with a straight face, because they said to him, what are you, crazy? There's always been slavery. It's in the Bible. Some people aren't people. There's nothing you can do. And he said, no. A new world is coming. A new world of equality where every human being is equal to every other human being. And he reclaimed the imagination of what it means to be human for a lot of people, which then led to the movement toward the vision to make the improbable probable, possible, and actual and true. Your job is to stand up in Montreal and say, "Excuse me, world, but we are announcing today the abolition of war and sexism and racism and hunger and poverty and torture and nuclear weapons, environmental destruction. Try it." Because everybody's going to say, well, you're crazy. We're going to go, no. A new world of nonviolence is coming. The kingdom of God is at hand. You and I have to help our people reclaim the imagination of what we could be. And once we can see a way forward into a nonviolent world, we can worship a God, nonviolent God, and build a movement of nonviolence to make that world come true. What do you think of that? That's a methodology. I could talk at length about that. My hope is, I wanted to say a fifth point about the sisters just for a minute, that I hope that you will take this and run with it in bigger ways that you can't yet even imagine. And let it change you. And take risks. And not be afraid. And be the community of nonviolence that you're called to be. And speak boldly and loudly to Canada and wherever you are. Because you're going to be sowing seeds for a future we're not going to live to see. And it will bear good fruit for a harvest of peace and justice we may not live to see. And that's what we're called to do. That's all we're called to do. We can do that. And I say go for it. Be a beacon of light. Gosh, I got many more points here. They're rough too. Number 6. I can say this because of your name. Apostles of nonviolence are called to carry the cross. To be people of active nonviolence. The cross is not having a flat tire. Or I wasn't feeling so good today. Or I don't like my boss at work. Or I don't like the landlord or the neighbor. And I'm carrying my cross because look at me. That's baloney. That is not it. The cross is nonviolent resistance to the culture of violence and war. The minute you start confronting it with all the nonviolence you can muster, you're going to get pushback, and it's going to hurt. And now you're getting somewhere. Now you're following the nonviolent Jesus. When I was in jail, and forgive me for name dropping, do you all know who Sister Joan Chittister is? Yeah. So for those of you who don't know, she's probably the most important, famous nun on the planet, a voice for justice and women and all. She's my friend, and I was in the cell that was this big for 9 months. I never left the cell after I hammered on the nuclear fighter bomber. I was in the cell for 9 months. The toilet was there. The food came through the door. Phil was here. I was in the top bunk. It was awful. And we each got 5,000 letters during this 9 months. And I actually saved them. I was able to and smuggled them out and so on. Every single person who wrote to me said, "Oh, you poor guy. You poor guy, you're suffering, you're in prison." I was going, yes, I know. It was really bad. And I got 2 letters within the same week. One from Sister Joan Chittister and one from Mother Teresa. Don't mind me name dropping. And Mother Teresa writes to me and goes, "Dear John, oh, thank God you're suffering. I'm so glad you're in prison, and I hope it's really horrible. This is really great. Now we're getting somewhere. I'm so excited to have a priest in prison for hammering on a nuclear weapon. This is really just tickles me. I'm going to try it and come and see you." I'm still shaking just even telling you that. I was like, "Hey, I'm suffering here, Mother Teresa." And then I get a letter from Joan Chittister. She's like, "Oh, thank God you're suffering." And this is the sentence Joan Chittister wrote to me. "You are reminding us that the only way to be a peacemaker is to enter and share and risk the paschal mystery of Jesus." You can handle this because you're the Sisters of the Holy Cross. Let's go for it. But that leads to my last point, which is that as people of apostles of nonviolence, that's what I hope you're people who are practicing resurrection, like I said earlier. People who are welcoming the risen nonviolence, Jesus' gift of resurrection peace. Yes. We're going to try to live and breathe in peace as much as we can. That means to let go of every drop of resentment, violence, and death within us and go forward into the world of violence as apostles of nonviolence. Isn't that great? I invite you, why don't we get into small groups for about 15 minutes? And what do you think about all this? I don't even know where to begin. I could ask you questions, but maybe it's better. I was talking about the nonviolence of Jesus, the Beatitudes, and a little bit of the Sermon on the Mount. What touches you here and inspires you? What challenges you or scares you? Or where do you see as a next step forward? Why don't you turn it to people around you and talk about these lovely things for about 15 minutes? Thank you so much for listening.